Okay, are we ready for me to read the script to get us going while people are coming on? Okay. All right. This open meeting of the Select Board and Conservation Commission is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. For this meeting, Select Board is convening and Conservation Commission is convening by video conference via Zoom webinar as posted on the town's website. As a preliminary matter, do you want me to confirm all Select Board members, and then Ashley, you want to confirm yours, or you want me to confirm everybody now?
That's up to you. If you want to confirm everybody now, I'm fine with that.
Okay, I'll just confirm everybody, and then we can.
Yeah, and then after you call to order, Jason, Ashley will have to call to order.
Sure. Okay. All right. By roll call, please state your name. Christy Ferrantella.
Here.
Or just say you're here. Don Holgate. Don, are you frozen? Okay. Melissa Murphy.
Here.
Matt Fee.
Here.
We'll see if Don comes back. All right. Seth Engelberg. How you doing, Seth?
Here.
Maureen Phillips. I don't know if Maureen, can you hear me? Okay, she's here. Ashley Arisman.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I can hear you. I apologize.
I'm here.
Hi. Mark Beal.
Here.
And Don, can you hear me now? Are you here? Okay, and Linda Williams.
Here.
And then staff, we have Jeff Carlson.
Present.
Libby Gibson.
Present.
Erica Mooney.
Present.
And I think that's everybody. I've checked all the boxes. Okay, we go back to the script. We're using Zoom webinar for the meetings, which allows for the public to participate in the meeting as an attendee. Today, we're not doing that. We're not taking any public comment. People registering to be, okay, we don't need to go through that. All supporting materials that have been provided to the members of this board are available on the town's website. Okay, please remember to mute your phone, computer when you're not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly. All right, I think we're almost done. All right, I think that's good for the script. Are we missing anybody?
Jason, I'm speaking with Ian right now. He's having trouble logging on.
Okay.
Let me send him the link.
He's on as an attendee. I'm going to try to promote him into a panelist.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So at this point, I guess I need to call the Nantucket Conservation Commission meeting to order. So we are entering with you guys on the select board, and we are waiting for Ian and possibly Dave LaFleur.
Thank you, Ashley. I'll call the select board meeting to order as well. While we're waiting for them, Ashley and I talked before the meeting and asked what's the best way to facilitate this. And we just thought it would be best if whoever raised their hands in the order they raised their hands, that I would just call on them as we go, versus having Ashley call on her members and I'm commissioners and members. So if that's okay with everybody, I would just do that. Just raise your hand and raise your digital hand if that's easier. Okay, I see we got Ian.
You do indeed. Thank you, Jason.
I am. We're going to wait for Dave a little bit, Ashley, or you just want to get going?
I think we should probably just get going.
Okay.
Yeah, and if he joins, he joins.
Okay. All right, thank you. Well, this is a long time coming. We've been trying to schedule this meeting for a while. It's hard to get this many people on the same time frame. So thank you all for finally getting together, and thanks for staff for all the work they're doing in all of this. So select board called this meeting, and so I wanted to start with why are we here. I've got a list of 7 things so that to kind of keep the conversation going, but I think it's going to go pretty fast, and there's a lot to talk about. I can tell you that in my short 4 years-ish being on the select board, I've always gauged a topic, how complex it is, if I can distill it to a friend or family member, or used to be my coffee clientele, pretty quick. And this was the one that I never could really quickly distill. It's so complex and it keeps getting more complex. And so I think having this meeting with us might be on the rare side, but it's important because we've never had an issue this complex. And so I think that is why we were here. I know we're not going to solve every problem today right here, but I think it's really important that we all get to talk to each other and not kind of read things in the media or kind of hear things around town. I think it'll be really, really important. So I am really interested in just hearing from everybody and coming up with different approaches. I think the Select Board and the Conservation Commission have completely different approaches. They have different charges or different missions, if you will. So it makes sense that we're looking at different things, and it's important for us to talk. That's my quick opening. I wanted to open it if Dawn or any other Select Board members wanted to just open up with why you wanted this meeting, what you'd like to get out of it in general. Dawn, would you like to? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I'll make a couple comments. I mean, I'm hoping, for us to just have some open communication and try and figure out a path forward that's, best for the whole of the island, that keeps us out of kind of never-ending legal battles, and just, open the door for us to talk about what both of our charges and how we can find the best way forward.
Thank you, Dawn. Melissa?
Thanks, Jason. I don't want to be incredibly redundant, but I do share those sentiments. And, I think that there is a complexity between the regulatory obligations of the Conservation Commission and the broader policy pictures that the Select Board has to consider. But both of us serve the taxpayers and citizens of Nantucket. So there's got to be some common ground that we can find, and a way forward where we're both respectful of what each other is up against. This is an incredibly complicated issue that is developed over a long course of time. And we are the group now charged with finding a way to untangle some of these knots. And I'm confident that we can do that through some good conversation and a more collaborative approach. So thank you.
Any other Select Board members? Any opening comments? Or anybody here? Staff, Conservation Commission? As I was preparing for this, I thought, oh, sorry, go ahead, Ashley. I didn't see her.
No, I was just gonna say I'm happy we're finally meeting together to kind of figure out a path forward. But at the same time, I think we have to look at, some of the past activities in the last 6 months and kind of figure out how some of them transpired to get us where we are, to kind of move forward. So I think that's going to be important for us.
Maureen?
Thanks, Jason. I just wanted to add, I was listening to what you said, and obviously we are all here because this is such a hideously complex thing. But I guess I disagree when you say we have completely different charges. We all share a charge to do the best we can for the whole island. And we have a more specific set of charges. But I just want to say that I think it's very important that we all do our best to look at what we do have in common. And I think that will probably be the best way that we can go forward on this and figure out how we can work together in this very complex environment. Thanks.
Thanks, Maureen. Well, as I was thinking about this today, I thought getting started is going to be the hardest part. Once we get rolling, because there's a lot to get into. And so I was trying to think how do we get started? I know talking to Ashley, the commissioners have a lot of questions for us of the past 6 months and some different things. So I thought we could just start with I have 7 topics of discussion just to get us rolling, but not super specific, but start with two things. What are the Concom's goals with respect to Baxter Road, the project? And then the second one is, what are the Concom's biggest frustrations and concerns about the project? Maybe the first one. I think the second one's probably easier to roll off the tongue.
So Jason, are you asking us what our goals in general for Baxter Road are? Is that your?
That's what I had written down. Besides the enforcement order to remove the project, I guess what are the Concom's intent regarding the Arcadis recommendations to leave the geotubes there until an alternative solution arrives?
So, from my perspective, Arcadis is, again, separate from our kind of goal for Baxter Road in some ways. Like, we don't have goals for areas of Nantucket. We have, projects and applications that come in that need to stay in compliance. So I think our goal is to have a resilient resource area that if there's projects on the ground, that they are in compliance, not doing damage to, that resource area or anything down drift. As far as the Arcadis report is concerned, if you go back in history, back to 2013, the geotubes were actually put in so that the town could take action on moving the road way back then. So, from my personal perspective, the town has kind of delayed for almost 8 years. So the whole process of moving the road and getting that alternative on the ground needs to begin, especially in light of a project that has not been able to stay in compliance, consistently. But that is my perspective on that. I'm sure other commissioners have things to add.
Seth?
Thank you, Jason. I agree with what Ashley said. The Conservation Commission is a very pragmatic board. We don't have goals per se, like the select board. The select board is a strategic board. Its priority is to, ensure effective operations of the town and plan for the future. Our charge is to evaluate projects as they're proposed to us, to identify whether they are meeting the protections of the wetland resource areas we protect. And then also, after they've been permitted, to make sure that they're operating in compliance with their permits. So it's not within the Conservation Commission's charge really to think strategically about the whole island. I hate to say that because I'm a strategic thinker personally, but that's not our role. Our role is very specific and pragmatic to evaluate projects as proposed. We don't tell applicants what to do. We don't tell applicants what to submit. We just evaluate things that are submitted and carry on the regulatory process based on what's in front of us. So I think when you say the charges are different, the role of both boards is the same, is to protect the town interests, but the scope of the boards are much different, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's what I meant in the beginning, Seth, and to Maureen, your comments too, that in that sense, the strategic versus pragmatic, it's very different. Thank you, Seth. Maureen? You're muted, Maureen.
Sorry, I wanted to add to my fellow commissioners' comments that we if we have an applicant who is having trouble complying with a order of conditions, or has questions about even, what's going to fly, it's certainly not unknown for applicants to, talk to our staff and to get an idea of what the commission's thinking is on things. So we try and apply our regulations and and as well as the state DEP regs in a way that will benefit, again, the whole island without excuse me, no harm to the rest of the island, but also being able to see how we can help a applicant get to where they need to go. And the kind of strategic thinking that you are talking about is, and I'm not sure if this is proper to bring this up here, but we the town and you, the select board, and certainly to a lesser extent ourselves, but the Coastal Resiliency Action Committee, we finally have a strategic report there, the CRP. And so if you want to look for a strategic way to look at issues, all of which would be included in the rubric of that, of the final report, then I think that's where we go. Because I think it's very important for us, for all of us, to look to that report as our North Star, if you will, for how priorities get set and all of that. And again, that's your job. But we also, if there's things in those reports that might help an applicant provide us with a better kind of application for a change or something, then, if that's scientific evidence that they can use, then that's fine. But as Seth said, and Ashley said, the Arcadis special report that you commissioned is not, it doesn't rise to being an application to amend an existing order of conditions. That's how we run our lives. We have to run our lives that way. And we can't have, sorry. And we can't have applications, if you will, being done in the press and being done by outside consultants. And, there's a process, and that's really what we're looking to be able to continue with your support. And then with the Coastal Resiliency Plan as the guiding strategic plan for all of us, and which informs what we do, and certainly would inform what you all do.
Thank you, Maureen. Any other comments there before I throw another question, Matt?
Yeah, before we go, and just if I'm going in and out, I'm having trouble with my connection, but that's all right. Yeah, we're talking about strategy and we're talking about goals, et cetera. And I'm not sure that's sort of, in this specific case, we have, we removed. So, if there's a project that is not in compliance, the goal in my mind is to get them back into compliance, and so the strategy would be, what steps do you do to get them back into compliance? If it is actually doing harm, then I would say that my sense would be that we as a community would show how it's doing harm, and we would then, and take other actions. And so, so the question I think is somewhat appropriate to say, it took some doing, but to poll everybody, it took some doing to say, this is how we think we'd like to proceed, and to make that public and to start having those conversations. I think opponents, and kind of left it squarely in the middle for us as a community to sort out. And so, and I think that's, so anyway, so I think the question, I'm going a little ahead of myself. I think the question of goals is, as a Concom, what is the goal of the, removal order? Is your goal truly removal, or would you like to see them come into compliance in some other way? And how can we help you do that?
So can I try and answer that? Our goal is removal. We asked you guys for support a year and 9 months ago with your property. We got no support. We have tried to keep this project in compliance through numerous enforcements. And it was really clear that they were not going to come into compliance. They did not offer to come into compliance until after we issued an order of removal. And their project, unlike many of our orders of conditions, had clear failure criteria and steps for removal. So that was built into their project. And I think that for whatever reason, the applicant didn't think that we would actually act on the conditions of their permit. And we did. And again, that's years of working with them to try and keep this project in compliance. And we met with them in March of, I guess it was 2020. No, yeah, 2021. Was that last? Yeah, so 2021, about their 2019 sand report. They came back with a letter that they weren't going to come back into compliance. Then we met with them on their 2020 sand report. They essentially doubled down on that, and then we ordered it removed. So Matt, this isn't us not trying to work with an applicant. This is us trying to protect a resource area and adjacent resource areas. And again, it was clearly in their order of conditions that this project could fail and be ordered to remove. And that's where we are. So we are, trying to protect the resource area. And it's gotten to the point where to do that, the commission felt, with a 6-1 vote. So that's, an overwhelming favor of removal. So I think that's a pretty big message from, again, 6-1 of where we fall. We tried to work with them.
Dawn? Oh, sorry. I don't know who was up first, Dawn or Linda.
I mean, go first if you want.
Go ahead, Linda.
I am the one that voted against.
So Linda, can I correct you? Because you actually weren't even on the commission.
Oh, that was the second time.
Yep.
I voted against the other stuff after that. I have a problem. I understand the word failure has different meanings for different people, depending on what the issue is. I personally found that the geotubes were not creating a negative issue there. In fact, those pictures that were sent around this morning are completely misleading. Half the pictures were of the biodegradable jute south of this project, from what I could tell, that disintegrated in this lovely storm you guys just had. The geotube held. The grass is returning on that bluff, which is the only thing that's going to hold it together. And I did not see it. I understand the word failure is related to their non-compliance, but I don't physically see them failing. I think it worked. It held, at least held through 2 high tides, through that crazy storm. So I have a problem with requiring it to be removed for any number of reasons. And I'm having a problem with the whole thing, because I think removing it is going to create more of a problem than expanding it to keep the bluff, the toe of the bluff intact. And maybe some of the vegetation will grow back, which will stop some of the slide. It is a very complex issue, as Ashley said, and as Jason said, but I think personally removing these things, it's going to create more of a problem than leaving them in place. So I was hoping that the town and SBPF would make a joint application to the Concom so we can consider it again and talk about mitigation on the sand, regeneration of the sand, whether it's coming from the ocean or however it's being put on there, et cetera, et cetera. But I think we need to have a clean conversation with the town as partner on an application back to the Concom.
Linda, Dawn?
That actually ties into what I was going to say. I mean, basically what I'm looking for from all of you is, I guess our intention is to bring forward a joint application with SBPF and work with them to try and find something that is approvable. If we bring forward a new proposal, is it going to be able to be evaluated as a fresh proposal? Or is there too much baggage weighing this down? And, you know, if we can find something that is consistent with your charge and with Wetlands Protection Act, then it essentially the removal order would become kind of besides the point if there's something that is now approved that can be, and the town has signed on to make sure that it stays in compliance. And the other point was actually what Linda mentioned is, has the removal impact been clearly evaluated? Because there may be some significant environmental concerns with what happens if it's just wholesale removed right now. I'm not sure.
So, I mean, if the geotubes are removed, there's obviously going to be natural erosion that takes place on that bank. You know, that section of road that isn't actually stable with the geotubes, you know, will need to be moved. I'm sure you guys are aware of previous engineering reports. I think it was Marone and McBloom. I think I might have reversed those. But they said way back in 2012 or 2013 that these geotubes aren't actually stabilizing the road, that to be truly stable and safe, that bank will still have to reach a stable angle of repose. So to kind of put all our eggs in those geotubes protecting that section forever already is not a great plan. But again, you know, erosion will take place if they're removed. We are aware of that as a conservation commission. You know, that's what Nantucket faces. And as far as roping in a new NOI and like thinking about the current project that's on the ground, we have to hear applications before us. I guess you guys and SBPF would have to meet a burden of proof that what you're applying for isn't so similar to what was recently applied for. So you guys have to meet the burden of that statute. But you know, we are open to hearing applications. We can't just say, oh no, there's too much baggage, we just don't want to hear it. I mean, we have to again meet a threshold for changes to the application from what previously came through. So you guys would know better than us, you know, what your potential plan is with SBPF.
Melissa?
Totally forgot what I was going to ask. I'll put my hand down and come
Okay.
back when it gets there.
You might have a response to Ashley there, Seth?
I don't know if Linda's hand is up or,
I think it's been up the whole time, so I'm not sure if it's up or not. Go ahead.
okay.
No, it's up again.
Okay. Seth,
She
go
was,
ahead.
she was before me.
Okay, go ahead, Linda.
I think what we're missing is there's not been a real study of the adverse impact of taking the geotube out. I know Ashley just mentioned that there certainly will be erosion, but I think we need to have some sort of a plan, what's going to happen if they are being forced to take them out. Exactly what is the detrimental impact to the beach, the tow, the bluff, when the geotubes are removed. As I said, I'm not a fan of removing them.
Thank you, Linda. Seth?
Thank you. Regarded to if the removal process does go through, I think it's important to separate the conversations about what we're talking about of impact. Are we talking about impact related to the construction protocol itself? Because that will be conditioned in the removal order to not require impacts. Or are we talking about long-term impacts after geotubes are potentially removed for erosion and years down the line? So I think the removal itself will be done in a way, if it does happen, will be done in a way where the construction protocols will be required to stabilize that area while they're doing construction. And then what happens after is what the natural process would be. I want to get back to what was said about, a new application. As Ashley said, we evaluate applications as they come in. I don't think any of us are willing to say right now, will we accept something or not, because we'll have to see what's proposed. There are a variety of engineering solutions or nature-based solutions that exist in all parts of this island and throughout the world that could be permissible in this area, but it depends. We have to see the project as proposed. We have to identify that the proposal is substantially different than what was denied within the last 3 years. And then we have to evaluate the merits of that application once we read it. But I think there are certainly things that are permissible. And I think from our regulations, there are certainly things that are not permissible and cannot be conditioned to be permissible. So I was trying to find that balance of what would work.
Thank you, Seth. Melissa?
Thanks, Jason. I have a comment and a question. I think it's important, and I'm not sure that this was stated at the outset, but I think, Ashley, you mentioned the road relocation and how long that project has sort of been on the town's radar. But certainly with this board, there is select board, there is a commitment to follow two paths at the same time. One is what we need to do in the short term to prevent any damage that would cause, in our mind, could potentially cause any catastrophic damage or costs to the taxpayers. And so that's what we're talking about in terms of the additional, the new application. But then concurrently, there is also a commitment to take the $500,000. It's likely going to need to be more money than that was already allocated at town meeting, to actively look at what needs to happen with relocation. And as I'm sure you all know, it's an incredibly complex project. Even if we were to be able to say today that that was something that we wanted to do and we were ready to go to town meeting for an appropriation, there's a lot of complexities, most of which I don't actually know the 100% details of. I know that some of the easements that perhaps were secured, some of the properties have sold, so there have to be renegotiation of easements. In any case, it's a long process. And so from my lens, we're trying to do two things at the same time, one of which is to look at the short-term protection which may need to, and sounds like it does need to include an application for some expansion, which buys us time. I think I heard someone say, and I'm sorry, I don't recall who, that the geotubes aren't going to work forever. It is not our intention to secure a solution that will work forever. It's our intention to have a good solution that works, frankly, for however long it can work, and give us the time and the diligence that we need to do the road relocation. So that hadn't come into the conversation yet from the select board, and I wanted to put that on the table. And regarding the application, I guess it's a little bit of a question, and I'm not sure who to direct this to, but I've heard a couple of mixed messages from commissioners. So maybe I guess this is to you, Ashley. As an applicant, how do you work with applicants is it just your application is a yes or a no? Or is it, as Maureen stated, that applicants can work with commissioners and or staff to find the best solution forward? And I think that's an important thing to understand, is with all the different solutions that are out there, are the commission or the staff partners with applicants in trying to find the right solutions for a resource area?
Yeah, so I can answer that. I mean, we work sometimes for months with applicants on the same project saying, oh, nope, you need to tweak it, this aspect closer to the wetland. Can you make this solution, softer on this end? How about more mitigation planting over here? So we work with applicants regularly. And, frankly, when we talk about SBPF, I mean, we spent months actually trying to get them to compromise. And ultimately, we denied the expansion because they refused to compromise on aspects of their project we felt would be detrimental to the resource area. Speaking again about this project, we met with SBPF. It was about a year ago now. They wanted essentially like a pre-application meeting about their phase project expansion, and they actually decided not to come back in front of us to work with us. So we were willing to again look at their potential redesign, and they decided not to come back in front of us. So again, we work very well, I think, with applicants consistently to have projects that are approvable and can be issued orders of condition. So it's very rare that we're actually denying projects.
Thanks, Ashley. Melissa, do you have a follow-up, or we can go to Matt?
No, thank you very much for that,
Okay.
Ashley. I appreciate it.
Matt?
And mine's just to follow up a little bit on Melissa, but sort of before I get to that, I do think one of the, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ashley, one of the sticking points is geotube versus core bag, correct? Core bag is soft and is permissible, and geotube is not.
So Matt, we have suggested a whole host of different compromises. So not 4 tiers of geotubes, but 3 in a core roll. So we've tried to compromise. We haven't straight up said, no, it has to be all core or nothing. Right. Again, we've really tried to compromise, and the applicant had not wanted to compromise. So I think that's where we have to look at what Concom approves and say, okay, if we want a project to be approved, we might actually have to listen to some of the things that they want. Right. And that really has not happened. And that included us asking them to not have geotubes near a dune field, and ultimately that had to go through the DEP. But we've asked for things that they, again, did not want to compromise on.
No, and you and I have had that conversation when we were on the work group together, and the reason I'm saying that is I think from their perspective, what I think they're looking at the experiences that they're looking at what they're experiencing, and they're looking at what's happening. The pictures that went around today sort of show that they're showing the core bags ripped to pieces. and some of it drifting out into the, out into the water again, as they did 10 years ago. That's their reason, I believe, for sticking strongly on that. And I'm not saying that it shouldn't be 3-in-1 or some other, but I'm just explaining that's why I think partly why they're holding the line on that issue.
Right. So one of those pictures actually showed a giant hole in one of the geotubes, if you looked at those carefully, which is pretty scary when you think about how those geotubes are supposed to hold up. So I think commissioners anyway can differentiate between the soft installs and the geotubes. I do agree that sometimes the photos that go out, to the public can confuse the public, but I'm fairly confident that commissioners know the difference there.
Yeah, and some of the photos can be inflammatory either way, either direction. I agree with that. And I do think that we have gone to bat for some, you guys may not know it or appreciate it. We've gone to bat on issues, including getting sand on it and other issues that, the select board has done that. What I really wanted to comment on was Melissa was talking about, sort of one road and us needing to, if we think about that area, when I think about it, we have to figure out how are we going to get sort of the entire neighborhood how are we going to get them all on, together, accepting eventually that it's going to move. And I think that's when this started, and we've already received threats from neighbors that have said, well, if you're going to put that road in our backyard that we saw in the Arcadis plan, this has come to the select board. If you're going to put that road in our backyard, we're going to fight you every step of the way. And not only are we going to fight you, you're going to have to take the road. And not only will you have to take the road, our lawyers are going to make you take our house and our property too, because we won't want to be next to that road. And we're going to make you pay everything. So there's a couple of those letters that came in after the Arcadis report. So we are walking a tightrope of how do you protect, cause no harm and do protection and put together the Coastal Resiliency Betterment District, put together a retreat. How do you put all those things together, and how do you work how do you get a hold harmless from the individuals so they aren't doing what's happened to the town at Sheep's Pond? So those are the big pictures. When I drill down into this and say, what path does the town take so that we can do the right things? Those are the things that we are going to have to do, not only in Baxter Road, we're going to have to do that at Sheep's Pond again, and in Nantucket, and a lot of other areas where we're going to have to do sort of negotiate, where we're going to have to, do some things that maybe we don't want to do or didn't want to do because the world is changing. We're going to have to take sand from somewhere and get a ton of sand to put on a lot of different projects. So how do we, as a community, how do we find a way forward to do that? So those are some of the issues that we're dealing with on our level. Some of the stuff that you hear, like, oh, you can just charge betterments, this won't cost anybody. Those just aren't, a lot of that isn't true. When you drill down into what's happening at Sheep's Pond, which was, $80,000, you could do it in a day with a bulldozer and fix that, and redo those roads, multiply that by 10 or 20 on areas that are tarred and have utilities and everything else in them. And then figure out how are we going to do that with limited staff right now, with inability to hire and trouble, no BW head, no Mike Burns, so we've no transportation person, this isn't so we're struggling saying, okay, we'd like to get these things done. How are we going to get them done? It was difficult enough when those pieces were in place. It's more difficult now. So I think our time frame is, in my mind, isn't, 2 years or 3 years. When that road is within 25 feet, McBroom and I'll butcher the name too, Ashley, McBroom and McBride or whatever. M&M, they said when it was within 25 feet that we had to be starting relocation. And we had that sort of worked out. It's sold, that may be worked out, it may not be. We haven't got to that level of detail for the northern section. But I think it's not gonna, depending what path we choose, it can be easy or it can be hard. And so those are the things that we're struggling with as, on our side, trying to deal with it. So that's how we've derived the path that we have, chosen at this point. And, what I would like is what can we add to what we're doing that would make it better for you guys? What things could be improved upon, going forward? What things are we not thinking about at all? Those are kind of the sort of, I'm more pointed on going forward. How do we do better?
Thank you, Matt. Maureen? And then Seth?
Yeah. Thank you, Jason. And both to Matt and the rest of the select board. What you were talking about is a lot of the points in your the draft position statement, and I've been spending some time looking at that, and I'm very concerned about the kind of the weight that seems to be given to threats of litigation and that the Sconset Beach Preservation Fund has always been extremely aggressive, and which is fine. But what we've all said, what my fellow commissioners have all said is, any applicant, they still have to go, by the rules. And so because we're getting threats from homeowners on Baxter Road that may or may not happen. And obviously some people there have assets which they can use to do that. But it's kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater in terms of focusing on this particular area because they have been so aggressive, so unwilling to compromise, as Ashley was talking about, that there's a sense of that this is what they deserve, if you will. And they deserve to be in first place. They deserve to have the top priority of any place else on the island. And I think putting the worry so high up on your worries about litigation and the costs of formally taking any property and all of that. I think that there really has to be an understanding to all people who live and own property on this island that there are rules that apply to everybody. And yes, Baxter Road, and there are also facts and science and engineering plans about Baxter Road. We need to stop having people who say, well, I feel like that's working, and I feel like if we remove it, then it won't be good. And, we act using science and facts. And there's a lot of science and a lot of facts and a lot of past reports looking at Baxter Road. And I don't know whether those have been reviewed recently by the town. I don't know whether that was part of what Arcadis looked at for either the report that you specially commissioned for them, for the Sconset people for their benefit, or for the CRP as a whole. Because I just don't think we can kind of say, well, it doesn't matter what happened before. What we're faced with now are people threatening a lawsuit. And so therefore we need to move heaven and earth. We need to, settle the old lawsuit, the settlement of the old lawsuit by the select board, working with the Sconset Beach people. That came as a surprise to the entire Conservation Commission. And, actions like that make it very hard for there to be, the kind of commonality and ability to work together if, parties are not being transparent about what they're doing. We have bent over backwards to be transparent in why we said what we said, what we rely on, look at the past orders of conditions. And so it's frustrating to have actions taken without any kind of even mere consultation or even notice that wind up having an impact going forward. And you've got now that settlement that you chose to make of the extension lawsuit. That if that hadn't been done, it's quite possible that there could have been a decision by the court that could have helped the town have a legal basis to do many of the things you're concerned about. And I don't know how that came about. I don't know what your reasons were. We weren't privy to any of that, unlike the opponent in the lawsuit who clearly was working with you all. But, it's really complicated when you get off of, when you start forgetting about facts and science and the consequences of failure of an applicant to maintain a project and meeting failure criteria. And then the fact that they met that and knew it, this somehow we're all supposed to, we are expected, it sounds like, to say, oh, well, that doesn't matter. And now we're going to go forward because we have this set of fears about who's going to sue us and how much and whether or not they will let us do what we need to do for the island. And I just think it's a really impossible situation to try and be strategic when such a high concern is getting sued by a number of well-to-do homeowners. So I'm trying to see where we can have some common ground, but it's pretty hard. At least it's hard for me. Thank you.
Matt, is your hand up? Is that left open?
Yeah, no, I think Marion, I agree with like 70 or 80% of what you said. I think that you're making some sort of charges and placing some motivation on our decisions and on us that, and assumptions that I think are incorrect. And so I think that's, we aren't jumping the line. Like we had Nantucket saying the same thing. This is something that's been ongoing for you guys and for us. And that's how it's being portrayed is, look, you're scared and therefore, you're doing this for Wisconsin and not for anyone else. We're doing this for Wisconsin because it's an existing situation that we all have, we're all encountering, we're all inheriting. If I could go back and do things differently, I probably would. I would have written had the lawyers write the easements and things differently than they did. We're inheriting the situation we're in. I think we all have to be careful not to attribute motivation and and sort of evil intent to some of this. I think we all have to take a step back and be careful of that. That isn't what, at least that's not what I believe how we've acted. So.
Maureen, did you raise your hand?
Yeah, I just want to say, I'm glad you agree with the 70 or 80%. I would love to know which 70 or 80%. You'll have to let me know. But I was really going by all the statements in the draft position paper, which discuss worrying about the town's exposure and lawsuits and quagmires and all of that. So I was very struck by the emphasis on that. So that's where I got those things. I don't deal with social media. Maybe I should, but I don't. And so I was, and also the, going back to the settlement of the expansion lawsuit, You know, that is something that I just will never, I cannot understand. And because of what I believe we gave up when that decision was made. But, you know, that's water under the bridge, and it can't be undone as a you know, as a normal legal process. But, you know, all these concerns are right there. So I'm sorry if I made more of them than you meant to, but I think that seemed to be there already. So thanks.
Any other comments on this, Dawn? Sorry, I didn't see your hand.
I'm not concerned with the threat of litigation. I'm concerned with sort of the inability to move forward on this and the threat of Baxter Road. It's not that we're not willing to defend things in court. I mean, frankly, I don't even really think of it as a settlement, more that they dropped that lawsuit and that was a positive move. No, Maureen, please don't interrupt me.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
We can, it's fine if you want to call it a settlement, but they did drop that litigation. And it was obviously in light of our suggestion that we would move forward with trying to come to an application that would be approvable. And I find that our job is to try and not have things completely stuck in court as they fall apart, essentially. And to try and find the common ground to get to the place that we need to be. And there are a lot of things that could have been done differently over the time of this. I mean, I didn't start this, I inherited this in 2015, and we've really had a hard time as a board trying to figure out what to do. The other point is that the reason the focus is on Sconset is not because we're prioritizing Sconset. It's because, as Matt said, it's an existing project. And frankly, the Conservation Commission has somehow forced us to have it rise to the top right now with the removal order, because we have a threat of the road collapse and we've got to figure it out. We are going to have to build a new road. And we're not ready. We've lost easements recently, but we have made a commitment to get that sorted, but it could take 5 years or more to go through all of the legal issues that are going to play into that and get the funding to actually put in the road. It will be helpful to have the property owners out there support us in doing that. So I think that we will give equal weight to all parts of the island as things come forward. But this is just at the forefront right now. It's certainly not because it's more important than anything else.
Ian, did you have your hand up for a second? Or did you put it down?
No, I did, Jason. Thank you, because I would disagree with Dawn respectfully when she said that Concom had put this in the select board's lap. SPPF, by its non-compliance, that's how it ended up in your lap. And it's in a lap that, as has been pointed out before, that you've had 8 years to do something about, and you haven't. And when I say you, I mean past select boards. And I certainly don't want to be personal anyway, because I think we're all sitting here knowing how many moving parts there are and how all of us might have done things differently with hindsight. But I just wanted to make that point to you, Dawn, that from my point of view, we've done what I feel is in the island's long-term best interests, which has acted as a regulatory board. And as Ashley has made absolutely clear, we've bent over backwards with SBPF on a number of occasions from our point of view. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Ian. Melissa, did you have your hand up, or do you want to go to Seth? I saw two hands. Seth?
Thank you. I think we're all on the same page here that the long-term strategy is retreat. Then we think about what are the other two kits in the coastal planning toolbook. There's mitigation and adaptation. Currently, there's a mitigation strategy being employed that's not operating as intended because the condition of that permit isn't being followed. So sometimes, although it may cause issues, in order to move one step forward, sometimes you have to take two steps back. So if the SPPF or the town and SPPF or the town itself wants to come forward with a new mitigation project that could meet our wetland regulations, then the removal of that project may be required because what is proposed may be substantially different than what exists on the ground now. Or maybe there's an adaptation solution that could be done in that area. I think what we need to see is something different than what's there right now. I think if you think about the history of the project, the history of noncompliance, the history of denials of past permits, I go through the extensive record, years and years of permitting. It's clear that a variety of things have come up to the top of this. One is that parties are not following the orders of conditions. Two is that in some cases, for expansion of like geotubes, let's say, it's unlikely that they even could follow in order because things like sand sources have not been defined. So I urge any applicant that comes forward to be creative. The Coastal Resiliency Toolbook is a vast, large kit. It's not just geotubes or nothing. There's a whole suite of strategies, some which are very hard armored structures that probably will never get permitted, some that are nature-based, and then all the way down to just the natural system doing what it will do. I urge any applicant to be creative and really look into the record and think about what the issues have been in the past. I'm not going to state them all here because I would take up an hour of time, but look at the record, view the past meetings, look at what has been identified by the Conservation Commission as being issues, and then be creative with an application that does something different and doesn't have to deal with all those challenges that exist. I'm an ecologist, not a coastal planner, but there are tons and tons of good ones out there. I know the towns work with some already, but think about what could work and what couldn't work and go from there. And in that process, removal actually might be beneficial for the overall planning of this neighborhood.
Mark Beal.
Thank you, Jason. I'm relatively new to this application and this whole process of the Wisconsin Beach Preservation Fund, having been on the board for only a year and a half, but I've been very troubled by their lack of cooperation and their lack of spirit of cooperation with us. I'm troubled by their being so far behind in their sand. It's between 40 and 60,000 yards that they've not put on top of the geotube, which they are supposed to do by their permit, and they just said, we're not going to do it. And then they said to us, if we don't get the entire expansion, we're going to hand the whole project back to the town. That's troubling. Also, I'm not sure, sand sourcing is a major concern, but that's something that they will have to address, so the town will have to address when the time comes. But if they're unwilling to maintain the 900-foot geotube process now, plan now, it makes me skeptical that they would be agreeable to do a 3,000-foot expansion. They've not done their job for the short one. It's troubling if they would be be thorough with the expansion. So there we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Is it Matt next? Go ahead, Matt.
Just, yeah, Mark, I think the rationale for not, the rationale for not performing right now, the reasoning for them not performing some of that is they had expectations from our previous agreements that they would be in front for an expansion of some type long before now. That was their expectation. That expectation hasn't been met from our side or Concom's side or somehow. So they're trying to find what leverage do they have? What leverage does SBPF have to get what they need? And that, I think they have my guess is they have the funds to do this, but that is if it's expanded somewhat. And so I think that's that is the situation we're dealing with. I believe that's a possibility. The money will be there. I also think, from the work group, we understand sand is going to be a huge issue. I think that was something the town's going to need regardless of this. And it's one thing that they are willing to work on and permit because it's something that they are going to need. They know they can't afford to do, another 900 feet or whatever they're going to do. Don't pick a number. They know they can't do more without sand, and they are willing to do that and sell that back to the town at cost for our town projects. We as a town would be responsible to find places to put the sand. The sand would hopefully be moving by slurry rather than by vehicle. So those are some of the things that our working group worked on about a year ago that I believe, I haven't clarified recently, but I believe are still valid and still doable because those interests are aligned. SBPF and the town's interest in getting sand and getting affordably and not driving it around in trucks all over the place. Those are all in alignment. So I think that's, so if that explains, it's part of what we're not just worried about lawsuits. We're worried, we're also looking at the long-term quality of life, on island and ability to have it for other projects.
Ian?
Thank you, Jason. So, Matt, we've known each other for years, and I have to say, I'm slightly baffled by what you're saying. In other words, they signed the orders of conditions, period. They knew what they were bound by legally. They've reneged. The expansion that you're talking about to the south, which is where Helmut's Choir tubes have created such a peninsular effect that they need to be removed anyway, and that's something we're talking about going forward, right? It has nothing to do with the road. In other words, right now, the existing geotubes protect the road and would continue to do so if the sand deficit was made up until you got all your ducks in a row to move the road. So I'm sort of, and I might add, tangentially, that when I was down there Friday afternoon to look at the damage on the actual tubes themselves, not only is there that major rip that was in the photographs that I assume you saw, and there was obviously the end scar to the north, but the bottom tier of the geotubes has numerous small perforations, sort of quarter size or so, in it, which makes me think, as without having any engineering degree or any deep knowledge of geotubes, that they're weakening, and that would be something that I would have thought it would be a good idea to get an expert opinion as soon as possible. Is how much longer are they going to continue to last? But so there we have it. And underneath this all is the fact that after stating numerous times that you were going to support us as the regulatory body that you've appointed, then all of a sudden we find ourselves in a position where you're no longer supporting us. And that also I find very disconcerting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Ian, can I ask you why you feel that we're not supporting you? Because the select board did support the Concom for the when the expansion was appealed, we supported that.
Well, yes, you did, Jason, but I think it was a tactical and legal error to allow to withdraw from the appeal, and but significant. I mean, and more to the point. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm under the impression that you're not supporting our withdrawal note, our notice to remove it, and it will be good. I would be pleased if you would say that, you know, that if we don't have a resolution at this point, that you will support our order to remove it. So that's why I said that, Jason.
Yeah. Okay. Just clarifying. Thank you.
Yeah.
Dawn?
I think part of the problem that we're up against is that we did commission the report from Arcadis. And I think she said close to a dozen times that the worst thing we could do is remove the existing project until we have a road in place. So that really leaves us in a very tough position in terms of us being able to answer to the rest of the community with that recommendation that was quite strong.
Mark?
Thank you, Don, for that. But I also noticed in the report, they did not mention an expansion of the geotubes, which I thought was very curious. I saw the part about not removing it because it might do damage, but I didn't see a recommendation that they add 3,000 feet of geotubes.
Yeah, I think, Mark, they said not to move it until you've got the road in place. So it wasn't in perpetuity. It was don't move it until you're ready.
So,
Ian and Matt.
Ian, you go
thank
for
you,
it.
Jason. So, Dawn, I absolutely take your point, but as you know, the removal was predicated on the fact of how many times that they hadn't held to the orders of conditions. And there was no question when there was the suggestion of possibly modifying the geotubes so that more sand was available in the littoral system during storms, that was rejected. So hopefully we can both see each other's positions on this going forward. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Matt.
Matt?
Yeah, I've lost it. It'll come back. Give me a
Okay.
sec.
Something that I think somebody just said, the Arcadis report is, I feel like they punted a little bit because they could have came out and said the expansion will never work, terrible idea for the environment, or they could say it was the best idea ever. They didn't. They just said it's probably not going to pass the regulatory board, so we're not suggesting it. So I didn't really. They could have went either way with it, with their knowledge, and that was my take on it. Matt?
Yeah, and that was the point I was going to make, because they kind of sat clearly in the middle on that by saying, if not for the basically, if not for the political climate and the unlikelihood of this passing, we find this effective. So they gave enough to both sides of the of this situation, and that's why actually we started that at the beginning of this. They left it to us as a community to figure it out,
Yeah.
Which here we are.
Maureen?
Yes, sorry. I want to underline or underscore the point about the sand. This is a point that's been brought up for years in terms of the difficulties and impact of thousands of truckloads of sand coming along the roads and essentially turning that part of the beach into often what essentially looks like a construction site, as opposed to a walkable, usable beach. And then I think it was a surprise to, I think, everyone about the incredibly increased cost of sand going forward. And the SBPF were clearly concerned about not being able to continue maintenance because of the cost was getting beyond what I guess they were comfortable with. And so that problem's not going to go away, and it's only going to get worse. And so I would like to remind you all of what Seth said a few minutes ago, that there are alternatives to geotubes. Alternatives that don't require sand would be of enormous help, around the island. There are alternatives used in other places, and whether or not they would be useful here, but there never has been a discussion about offshore reefs, artificial reefs that would break up the waves dynamics and have less force hitting the toe of the bluff. And that doesn't require sand being carted around in construction sites and the rest of it. Now, I'm not advocating, I'm in no way saying that that's the be all and end all, but that's the kind of solution, the creativity that needs to be brought to bear here, as opposed to saying one of the things we have to do is obtain a guaranteed good supply of salt. Yes, we need that right now, and we'll continue to need it probably for some other structures on island, but to build, to both keep the 900 feet, which has been impossible, unfortunately, to maintain so far, and let alone expand it with the way sand is available and the ability of the SBPF to maintain the 900, let alone the larger part. This strikes me as a solution that's not going to work. And so I think other alternatives need to be looked at, as well as, and this is something that was mentioned, I think, in your draft paper, a sediment transfer study really needs to be commissioned and done for this stretch of the beach. Now, that has nothing to do with the supply of sand. Those are separate issues. Sediment transfer study shows how the littoral environment is being impacted by the dynamics of the waves and the currents at a particular point. And it shows where it's most useful to put in some kind of alternative that's going to help the erosion. So and that's something that the town has hired people from the Center for Coastal Studies, Mark Borelli, to do some work around the island for that. But it's an incredibly important piece of information to have before any decisions get made about what happens here. And it's something that we had mentioned to the SBPF, but again, it was not a suggestion that was taken up. So I just want us to recognize that this is not a single, yes or no on geotubes. And if you say no on geotubes, it's going to be the end of Sconset. And I think if we are realistic about what can and can't be done, and look at the long-term needs as well, and please look at the coastal resiliency plan please, I think that is where we're going to find, richer ground to, maybe come to some kind of solution. But I don't see it locking ourselves into this chasing the tail of sand sitting on top of geotubes as being some kind of anything other than a stopgap solution. So.
Thank you, Maureen. Before I go to you, Matt, Jeff Carlson, we have a sediment transfer study coming up on the capital program committee, might be passed this year, but that's not for the east side of the island, right? That's more for Inner Harbor.
So the primary focus of the one that's in capital is focused on the harbor for the dredge plant component, but the original proposal for Mark Pirelli also included some work around the east and the south.
But it's not a comprehensive thing that we all would probably could use.
I think it would be a good start to building that information set, certainly.
Okay, thank you. Matt?
Yeah, I was going to say the sediment transport is a large recommendation for the entire island coming out of coastal resiliency. And sand, forget Baxter Road, sand is one of the key ingredients in most of the soft installations that we are favoring. It's what the people in Nantucket are asking, where's our sand? We thought we would, Dave Fransuto told us we had a bunch of sand coming. Where is it? So sand is going to be key to all these things. The other part is some of the designs, some of the dune fields that they're saying they're creating dunes. Some of those have sort of structures underneath before the dune. I'm looking at the pictures and I'm saying, this isn't at the toe of a bluff. This is like building a dune field by, putting these core bags underneath or putting the geotube bags underneath to build it. And it's going to take a ton of sand. Some of the coastal resiliency was talking about bringing sand from Nantucket, from one side of Nantucket, moving it from other, taking it from the harbor and moving it to the North Shore. Those are some of the ideas that they were talking about. Sand is a major ingredient to what we're going to be doing in the future. If you go down and look at some of the ideas that they did down at the Macy warehouse, they're talking about building little islands to, in the harbor. Not that this is in the future to protect the storm flow into the town. That's tons of sand. So I think, I don't know of anything that we're going to do in the future, not even counting Baxter Road, where sand isn't going to be a huge necessity. And I think it's kind of crazy to think it won't be. So that's my main point is, I've looked at a lot of this. I don't know anything that we can do that, that will not require that. Even the rock revetment, which was on the table, and I was the swing vote. We ended up with geotubes instead of rocks out there. Even a rock revetment takes a lot of sand over time, or the rocks disappear. You still have to put the sand in front to do it right, and to protect other beaches. So, sand is a key ingredient.
Thank you, Matt. Linda?
I think what's key to remember here is that the geotubes, and in my opinion, they are functional. That was one heck of a storm, but I think we have to remember that it's going to take a multi-pronged attack. Now, whether that includes the geotubes plus an artificial reef, plus revetment, plus planting the bluff, plus doing other things to protect those historic houses up there, the access to the lighthouse, all the work we've done when I was even on the planning board of trying to get easements and access through the properties across the street in order to access that part of Baxter Road, including moving those two houses actually onto the street layout. It's going to take an awful lot of people doing an awful lot of stuff on the same page. And I think the general opinion in the public is that the Concom, regardless of their jurisdiction, and the selectmen, regardless of their jurisdiction, are not all on the same page, yet we're all part of the same community, and we all have to work together, and we all have to do our parts in our particular venues. but it's going to take a multi-pronged approach, and the geotube seems to be working there as part of this approach. So that's why I'm taking a different tact on this.
Thank you, Linda. Just kind of made me think of something there. Like, we're all working in the same book, kind of what everybody said, Maureen, everybody earlier, of representing and doing the best for our community. We're working in different chapters. Maybe that's a better way of an allegory. Right? So that's strategic, pragmatic, regulatory, bigger picture. So I'm just filling some time before the next person raises their hand. Christy?
Thank you. Just more of a comment than a question. There's been a lot of discussion around the pictures that we all received today. And kind of one of my concerns, and I'm just wondering how this is being handled, is, you know, with the removal order, how are the structures being maintained in that time while it's going through litigation? And is the Concom allowing them to, you know, still maintain the project while it's going through this to ensure that there's not more damage on the bluff as it's going through?
Ashley?
So I think this is the piece where if we had legal counsel, it would be easier for us to navigate this. So I think that's where it would be really helpful if you allow us counsel and how to move forward with SBPF getting this removed and conditions in the interim now that it's been appealed. Because, you know, our order, they should be removed. The sand that was in them should be on the beach right now. But we're, you know, tied up in this appeal. So we're kind of in a stop until, again, we have some counsel to move forward and tackle the issue at hand. And, you know, I know those photos, again, are, can be jarring for people who don't see the conditions out there regularly, but that's kind of, you know, besides the major rip, again, in one of those geotubes, that is a fairly standard look for after a storm. But, you know, again, addressing the actual breakdown of those geotubes and if that is the material to move forward if you want an expansion. But again, as far as conditions for the removal and dealing with that, you know, we need counsel in how to move forward.
Linda, do you have your hand up?
Yes, I'm kind of disturbed by the viral dissemination of some of those pictures without explanation of those pictures. A substantial portion of those pictures have nothing to do with the geotube. It's the jute biodegradable pieces that are south of the geotube from what I can see. And they were destroyed. I mean, it was just, the wave action was just brutal out there during this storm. I don't want people to think that a lot of those pictures have anything to do with the geotube whatsoever. The geotube is also covered by a UV protectant piece of material that does have some rips in it that did get beaten up pretty good. So I don't want people to think that what they see on top of the geotube is rips all over the geotube, because that's not the case either. But these pictures have presented a idea that this is geotube disintegrating. It's not. And I find that kind of thing to be reprehensible on the part of the opposition. So I just want people to understand that there are a couple of holes, one hole in particular, in the geotube after this event with going through 4 high tides. And that can be repaired. And there are some small, as Ian said, there are some small, very small little holes in it, which is to be expected. But I just, I don't want anybody looking at those pictures on all these little town websites thinking that that is the geotube, because it is not. If you look at some of the other pictures, which are less pictures of that than there are of all the other stuff going on, that they need to pay attention to what they're looking at.
Ashley?
So I agree those pictures can be a little confusing. I think that hopefully the select board can tell the difference, and I know Concom can tell the difference. I think it's important because it does show, yes, the core breaks down because it's a natural fiber meant to break down, where the geotube isn't meant to break down. That's why the holes are more concerning. And I have to say, during hearings about geotubes, I actually brought up the material and its potential to contaminate with PFAS, because it's actually a polyfiber material. So as it's breaking down, it's actually leaching those sorts of chemicals into the system. So it might seem more robust, but the materials are debatable for a natural system. So I do think these are important questions. But again, I don't know that the pictures are confusing actual commissioners or select board members. And it does show a variety of different options kind of executed on that bluff. But yeah, it's definitely important for, I think, probably more select board members to make sure you guys are clear on how those materials break down. Because again, commissioners, I think, have seen it over numerous hearings.
Thank you, Ashley. Ian?
Thank you, Jason. So in response to Christie's question, which certainly is a highly pertinent one, my understanding is that until SBPF formally withdraws, they're still responsible for making sure that there's sufficient sand to cover the geotubes. And part of the reason why this impasse was precipitated, because we were told in no uncertain terms earlier this year that, as I believe Mark referred to, that if they didn't get their extension of the tubes, then they were going to hand off to you. But unless they've done that formally, I would have thought that they're responsible for making up this deficit, as well as adding, enough sand for the next storm. So, but Christy, that's a really good question. I was thinking that when I was down there on Friday looking at it. So, thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Matt?
I was gonna say, you should go to Jeff, because I think he has some info on that. That was the.
Yep, Jeff, sorry.
Sure. So I'll try my best to answer that question about the maintenance of the structure and kind of clear that up. So obviously, with the appeal being in place on the removal order, that permit is still in effect. So they're still, obligated to be maintaining that structure in compliance with the standing permit. And to take that kind of one step farther, I know they've already reached out to schedule some work and to start redoing the sand cover and pushing some stuff down from the template, and reached out about that. And just to also kind of touch on the structure to the south, I, right as this meeting started, actually was contacted by the folks who operate the structures in front of the Weimar property and the ones further south, the core tubes, about doing the cleanup and maintenance for those structures as well. So we've heard from all of the parties along there about kind of some post-storm activities that are planned and intended for down there, and that would be in keeping with their permits.
Thank you, Jeff. Matt?
A quick suggestion for you, Jeff, is, and for all of us, for our benefit, is while they're uncovered, could we get someone to take a look at the holes and, sort of examine those? Because once they're covered, how are we going to look at them again? I think for benefit of all, we should, understand what's going on.
Jeff?
So through you, Mr. Chair, we've had staff, myself included, and our new coastal resources tech on site at least twice since that storm to take photos and kind of document those things and look at those. And we'll probably try to get out at least daily until those are covered. And then we're going to try to be on site, obviously, once maintenance activities start going on, to be sure that any material that's delivered is in compliance, and also to monitor what's happening for both the structure on the northern end with the geotubes and the core structures to the south. So we'll definitely be out and around, but the suggestion is definitely appreciated.
Thanks, Jeff. Linda, is your hand still up? left over. Okay, it's left.
Just one aside comment. I don't think any of us should be making any decisions based on potential litigation, at least that I don't, nor how much money, as someone said earlier, how wealthy or not wealthy anyone should be, because there are plenty of not wealthy people out in Boxer Road, as well as Nantucket, as well as Dionis, as well as Cisco, that everything they own is tied up in their property, and they're going to do whatever they can, whether it's litigation or not, to protect their properties. And we shouldn't be denigrating them because this particular bunch in that section happens to be wealthy property owners. It doesn't make any difference, and we should stop saying they're wealthy property owners threatening litigation, because I think that is inappropriate.
Any other thoughts on this line of thinking or anything else? Anybody wanted to bring up that we've not touched on? While everybody's mulling that over, I'll just go over some things that I heard. Some commissioners have said if another project came, they would look at it. And I think Seth, you gave some, I wouldn't say parameters, but you touched on that a little bit. There was something I think I need to know more about I think you referred to the application can't be too close to the existing in the last 3 years, something to that, like you said, a statute. Seth?
Yeah, thank you, Jason. Under our local regulations, we have what's called a rehearing limit, where if a project has been denied within the last 3 years, we need to have a hearing to see if the new project is substantially different from the project that's been denied. That prevents us from having to hear the same project over and over and over again.
Right.
Like if the transfer of property went to a new owner, we denied it the previous owner, and then it went to the new owner. We don't want to hear the same exact project from a new owner. So that's where that comes into play. So before we even heard a notice of intent, we would have to do that rehearing limit hearing to see if the project was different enough to even consider it.
Jeff, do you know any more about that? I'm sure it's more of maybe there's more legalities there. How close, how do you know how close it is to the previous project? I guess we'd be talking about the expansion, right? Because that was applied for in the last 3 years.
Sure. So if I may, the rehearing limit, it's a portion of the existing bylaw. So it's within the actual code. And Seth described it pretty well, where it's just there to prevent, if we told a homeowner, you can't build a second dwelling there, that they just can't refile over and over again and try to just, fatigue the commission into submission to say, if you just go away, we'll give you the permit. I think in cases like this, what you're looking at it is you would need to show that there's a substantial difference from what was originally denied. And unfortunately, that's a little bit subjective to discussion. I think for other similar, kind of talks we've had, where if you were proposing something where even if the primary, structure was the same, maybe the management, the length, the composition, whatever the sediment budget would be for the structure, would simply just have to go in front of the commission. The commission would make a finding that they find it substantially different from the previous filing, and then you'd hear it as normal. Or if it's relatively the same, through that discussion that with the applicant can either make edits if the commission feels that it's not substantially different enough, and then come back. But there's certainly avenues it would be part of that public discussion. It doesn't come up very often, but the few times it's usually been pretty clear that, obviously people have feedback from whatever the denial was to take that and say, this is why it was denied. How do we adapt the project to better fit what the regulations are letting us do? Make those changes and then come forward. We've never had one that's been, at least in my knowledge, in the last 10 or 15 years, really, come back that's then been sent away because it's the same project.
Thanks, Jeff. Seth?
Yeah, and just to add, I think it's subjective as to what substantially different is, but I think it's pretty obvious as to what substantially the same is. Like if it's just taking the text of the denial that was for the expansion and resubmitting that under a different applicant or a different group of applicants, it's obviously not substantially different. But getting into what Jeff said with materials or with length or management or all that, that's what we would hear and decide on it at that point. I don't want to speak for the whole commission. I don't want to speak for the commission at all. I personally think that, I agree with Matt Fee that sand is going to be a useful component in coastal management on Nantucket in every location, but there are coastal engineering and nature-based solutions like living shorelines that require relatively no sand or relatively no ongoing sand. Might require sand to get the project started, but then don't require continuous delivery of sand. So I personally favor those types of installations, but we can't make a decision as to what the commission wants until a project is before us to hear.
Thank you, Seth. That's helpful. Ashley?
I have to agree with what Seth said about sand, that, when I think about, the larger coastal resiliency project in general and the amount of sand that's necessary, just, thinking, is it realistic? Sand is a limited resource globally. Yes, we're an island, we see it every day, but to actually feasibly get it, even if it's a permitted source from SPPF, how long is that sustainable? How much carbon dioxide are we spewing up in order to get this sand? Really thinking about a large picture, that the living shorelines and the nature-based solutions, tend to be the most, and I hate to use sustainable again, but the most sustainable and probably the most realistic and cost-effective when we're thinking long-term. Any project where you need constant renourishment, I don't know that the budget will ultimately be there.
Thank you, Ashley. Jeff?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick correction to something that I had said about the rehearing limit. I don't want to have the wrong impression. I know I used the word substantially different, and that's sometimes can be misconstrued. So I just wanted to clear it up because I pulled up the actual wording of it really quickly. And what it specifically says is that specific and material changes in the circumstances upon which the previous unfavorable action was based is how the commission makes that determination. So I think a lot of us view that as kind of fueling what that substantial differences are. But I don't want to, I know words get twisted around sometimes. So I just wanted to make sure we had that cleared up just for the record.
Thank you, Jeff. Seth?
Yeah, just quickly, again, on the nature-based solutions and living shorelines, I shared information with the commission related to a different topic, but related. It was related to bulkheads, and it was looking at long-term financial projections of nature-based solutions versus bulkheads. And not only are they ecologically more sensitive, in the long term, they're more financially sustainable as well. Running a project like the geotube is very financially difficult. It requires consistent resources on an annual, or actually more than annual, on a seasonal basis. And we know lots of projects on Nantucket are going to cost lots of money moving forward. And we're all in the process of trying to figure out how we're going to fund that. But some of these projects, it may make sense to consider things that cost more upfront and then take care of themselves. It's a tough thing to do, but can we can we think about what the absolute best solution for that area or any area is, try to get it funded, put it into place, and then save ourselves a ton of headache and money down the road. In some cases, we could and we should. In some cases, we might not be able to. But I think if we try to achieve this higher standard of optimal solution, it makes these types of conversations hopefully not have to happen every single year until 2100. You know, we're trying to put things into place that are going to be long-term sustainable financially, ecologically, and logistically.
Thanks, Seth. Not that we need to stop this meeting at all tonight. We could do it for 3 more hours, but we had it scheduled for 2. We have about 15 more minutes left. I'm sure everybody has to get to dinner or kids or pickleball. Any thoughts wrapping up? Anything you thought of from first hour that you wanted to address tonight? Any questions for anybody? Ashley?
I just want to say I just appreciate this discussion with everybody, you know, Concom and Select Board. I think it has helped to really make clear that we're not like against each other, even if we have differing of opinions, that, you know, we all in our own perspective feel like we are doing what's best for the town. And I just, again, appreciate everybody's time to have these conversations.
Thank you, Ashley. I completely agree. I don't feel at odds with, I feel more at odds with Matt sometimes than I ever would with the Conservation Commission. So I completely agree.
That's
that,
weekly, Jason.
I know that's weekly. Yeah, I agree. Like I said, I didn't maybe say it as well when we opened this meeting, of that we kind of look through different lenses for what we're charged with, and that's kind of where the difference of moving forward comes in. It's not even a difference really. It's just I feel like it's just different. So I appreciate everybody's candor tonight and honesty. It was informational for me. I learned from listening to everybody, and it's much better than reading quotes in the paper or watching your meetings 2 days later and then trying to catch back up. This is really helpful for me. Jeff?
Yeah, thank you. And I agree. And I think it's a productive long-term strategic conversation. I do think there are outstanding logistic questions that at least I have, maybe the rest of the commission has, that I'm looking for the select board to answers, like, is special municipal council going to be afforded? What's the timeline for a proposed new notice of intent, things like that. All these things that are fitting into the process, so we can plan and keep on our minds what's coming up. I think the longer conversation, there's a lot of consensus, but the short term, we still have our own pieces to move through, and being open about those things is going to help us plan for what we need to do.
Seth. Maureen?
Thank you, Jason, and thanks, Seth, for saying most of what I had wanted to say as well, because getting the issue of council settled is very important to us. But also I want to say that having this meeting is incredibly useful, and I would like to see us have these more often, as opposed to having things happen without one side or the other being aware of what's going on, because that way we can work together. If we may not always agree on what's going to happen, but keeping the lines of communications open is really, really important. And I think it's really important for the town to be able to see this as well. So I'm very glad we were here tonight. Thank you.
Ian?
Here, Jason. Thank you.
Any other thoughts? Erica, did you have a thought? You came on out of nowhere.
Just gonna remind everybody that both boards are gonna have to motion to adjourn.
We ready to adjourn or any other, comments before we go? It's my nature to always go to say next steps, but I don't know if we can figure out that exactly next steps right now. Matt?
Yeah, I was gonna motion, and I was also going to advise if the select board, if we have a chance to go look at the structures before they're covered, maybe we do that. I'll be back tomorrow. I won't be back, so I can do it Wednesday or Thursday. So motion to adjourn.
I'll second, but I also just wanted to add my thanks for the group meeting. I know, and thank you to town administration staff and to Jeff for working through all these complex schedules to get this on the books. And it's not easy. I think it's taken us 2 or 3 times and several different reschedulings. So nothing in government happens quickly, but thank you for your patience and sticking it out. I do agree also it would be fruitful as we start to look at, obviously Baxter Road seems to be a more immediate need in front of us, but there is going to be a lot of long range planning and the effects of the Coastal Resiliency Plan, which I have read. I'm sure many of us on the board have read, and I do think it's going to take a lot of strategic thinking with all of our boards and commissions about how as a community we're going to address this, and what I hate to say it, but a lot of it will come down to costs to the taxpayer, and that's a big consideration I know on the select board, for the select board. So when possible, to find opportunities for public-private partnership, it feels a responsibility of ours to explore those to the best end we possibly can. But I do have a great deal of respect for the Conservation Commission's work. And I thank you for your dedication to the work that you do. If ever there is an appearance of disrespect, I do apologize for that. It's certainly not intentional on my end. And I don't want to speak for the board, but I think it's the sentiment we all have. We're trying very hard to untangle a very complex solution, and no disrespect is ever intended. We have the utmost respect for the work you do. So thank you. And I seconded Matt's motion to adjourn.
All those in favor by roll call. So Matt Fee,
Aye.
Melissa Murphy,
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella,
Aye.
Don Holgate,
Aye.
Jason Bridges, aye. We're adjourned.
All right, so Conservation Commission, we also need a motion to adjourn. Mark, were you making that motion?
I'll
Also
second.
move.
I'll
Uh,
second.
Seconded by Linda, so by roll vote, Beal,
Aye.
Engelborg,
Aye.
Arisman, I, Golding,
Aye.
Phillips,
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned as well.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks,
Good
Linda.
night.
Very helpful.
Good night. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thanks, Jeff.
you all.